Welcome to the Tribe of the Restored Warrior podcast, where coming home changed doesn't mean you're broken.
Welcome to another episode of the Restored Warrior. I'm Justin, your host, joined again by Dr. Ben Yopes and Chris Schierloh, who is a paramedic and an EMT. So I guess we'll get into a little bit about you, Chris.
Sounds good, brother. My name is Chris Schierloh. I work for a pretty big progressive city department. I have been in emergency medical services. This is going on my 16th year, I believe, altogether, from starting out EMT to paramedic. And I could ramble on, but I think that's the long and short of it,
What are some, what's a hardship that you faced in your professional work? So something that kind of knocked you off center. And that can be within your personal life that spread into work. And how did you deal with it? How did you work through that?
Oh, man. So, I mean, there's two that come to mind when you guys bring it up. I'm coming out the other side of divorce now. That was very ugly. It's getting better, That one I think is too raw to really go on. I'll go on and just start rambling about it. As far as calls go, I think, for a lot of medics, anyone in public service, I feel like, when that question comes up, your head goes to a bad call, and probably, a pediatric shooting victim, it was an accidental shooting. They were very young. And it was his own brother that did it. So I think that was a really tough one to reconcile because, two kids died that night, realistically. You hope that's a bleak way to look at it, but it gets hard as the years go on. You have to challenge yourself almost to be positive. So that was probably the worst one I think I've ever had. And I don't think I carried it with me too long, but it's just, I feel like that stuff piles on over time. And at least for what we do, I think the stress is different, right? So like first responders in general, we carry a similar burden, but for paramedics, I think it's unique for me anyway, in that I'm responsible for everybody's health and welfare. And when you work a progressive system, a lot of times you'll look at, a lot of different metrics to kind of help keep your own burnout at bay and keep you going. And anytime somebody dies in your care, it's a negative. Well, if it's a kid, it's a super negative. And then you add, it was completely preventable, and it's a heavy burden to bear, One of the things I do, I use mindsets, I think, to combat my career long-term, and constantly remind myself, kind of like Mr. Rogers always said, right? The helpers, right? Like I'm part of the solution, not the problem, And I didn't contribute to the problem or create the problem. I'm just here to try and help and assuage the misery as much as I can, And I find that I think in our function, in the whole system, you definitely, I feel like you have you're a lot of the grief mop in a sense. So you have to develop good positive coping mechanisms and good working relationships. You have to have like that tribe mentality. Sorry, I hit like 10,000 different topics at one.
Well, that's fine.
For me, and overcoming that particular call, or I think that was a really kind of a dark period in general with my career. I just focused on the fact that it's not my fault. I was just there to help. It was easier. That particular call went, great skills wise. We were able to get a difficult intubation on a pediatric airway at 60 some miles an hour en route to a trauma center with blood and gore everywhere. Working together as a team with a fireman driving us, or no, police were driving us that night. So like, that's another aspect I try and focus on. Like I try and focus when I think of that night in general, I think of how many people came out of the woodwork to help us out. Mm-hmm. That's the memory that always stands out before anything else, like that night, the medevac crew that had nothing to do with anything and the Medic 1 crew that wasn't on the call cleaned the blood off of our stretcher. Everybody in the trauma team was very supportive. It was a very somber experience, and I think things like that, if you can open your eyes and focus on them in those moments will show you the quality and the content of the characters around you that you work with, regardless if they're acquaintances or you don't even know them, or, they're your friends for years that you've served with. So I think camaraderie, I guess, long and short answer, one of the many pieces of the puzzle, but it's all of those things. I think it's all of those things at once, and to varying degrees, everybody's different, but I think any paramedic would benefit from a multitude of everything I just discussed, I guess. The mindset, having a good coping mechanism, whatever it is, something healthy to do, something physical usually, and a tribe of like-minded individuals that have been through it and are going to help you through it in little ways, like making a stretcher, helping you restock, and cleaning your coat, and making sure that, they get you out within a reasonable time. Because that was a late call for us too. That call kept us late on shift. So
I'm hearing three things really coming through on that we talk about a lot. One is the perspective. So obviously horrible situation, but training our brains to view it from a positive perspective. So what went well in that situation? It's a horrible situation, but what went well in it? The second thing that I'm hearing is the community of first responders and veterans, because we help that community as well, working together and making it okay to be a human being within that capacity. And then the third thing that I'm hearing is having healthy wellness practices within the rest of our time, the rest of our lives, so that we're not already going into those difficult situations with a quarter tank of gas. Would that be accurate?
yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. So within that, if you were to give EMS and first responder leaders in general, or people working with veterans, one tip to help their people be healthier in a mental health capacity, what would that be?
You need to show them that you need to prove that you look at your people as your number one asset. Like the people, I'm blessed. I have great culture where I work for the most part. It sure as hell ain't perfect, and we fight like brothers and sisters, and it can be a mess sometimes. But, unequivocally, those people value me and care about me, and they show it. My command staff shows it to me in a million different ways throughout a week. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. I couldn't say in a 12-hour shift, but in a week, I could probably come up with, off the top of my head, a minimum of 5 examples of senior paramedics, training staff, or just being better than me. Leading by example, and also showing me that they care about me in little ways. So that's the biggest thing. If you're a supervisor and the easiest example I think is anybody who's trying to get out of work, like if it has to do with their family, policy, like all that stuff matters, right? But like if it has to do with their family and they're trying to get off of work, and you have the time that you can, like, take some time, help them get off, make some phone calls for them, page out for, like, simple little things like that, I think go much further than any command staff or leader really notices in the moment or long term, and that's it. That's the simplest, purest answer. Everything else matters, sure, but I will not work anywhere where I feel like I'm not valued, or it's just it.
So remembering that we've got amazing professionals, but they're also human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
That's a big part of it, because, as the years go on, dude, and you experience this too plenty of times, like, we think this is normal. Like we literally, we get so involved with our profession's all a noble one, no matter what lane you're in. So it becomes a part of your identity too. It's a big part of your identity. And I lost my train of thought completely, but
that's all right. It's a good point you bring that up, the identity piece, and kind of want to dive into what are some tips you think for individuals in your line of work to kind of stay well.
You can't hate it. Like the longer you do it, the more chance there is that you might end up hating it, and for paramedics, I think the number one cause of burnout. Though I cited that call as an example. I think misuse of the system is probably what burns medics out faster than anything else. And what we have to, I mean, the trick I use anyway is remind myself that though I'm here for the worst case, and that's what we train for. So maybe it's messed up to say, but that's what we look forward to doing. We look forward to performing in the moment what we've trained to do for years and years and years, and snatch somebody back from the reaper, man, as corny as it sounds. Like, that's it. And as the years go on, you realize that you're doing that, less than 3%, 1% of the time. And typically you need to adjust your mindset and say, I'm a mobile healthcare provider that is out here to help anyone that needs help. Because a lot of what we deal with, especially in city EMS, you're treating the price of poverty everywhere you go. Seldom is somebody calling at 3 o'clock in the morning with mild symptoms because they specifically wanted to ruin your day or disrupt your shift or whatever the case may be. They don't know what else to do. Everybody doesn't start out the same way. Everybody doesn't have, some people have zero support systems. They have nothing, So a lot of, I think, lasting and surviving is you have to get good at reminding yourself all the time that, like, okay, yeah, this was not the intended use of 911. All right. We have established that. I've established that within 10 seconds of walking into the door and, listening to the patient who the call was shortness of breath, and they've just literally spent the first entire section of the call rambling on and on and on and on about some psychiatric issue that it is. So, like, in that moment, you can choose to be a compassionate human being and a good paramedic, or you can let your burnout take the reins and be a dick. Unfortunately, we lose that fight sometimes, and you have to constantly remind yourself that you got into this to help people when you were a wide-eyed teen or 20-year-old.
Yeah.
And that function never changed. You allowed the negative aspects of that job to permeate through you and change you. Like, you're still the same 20-year-old idiot that thought he was going to save the world that got into, like that never changed, man. So I think any tip and trick, it's different for everybody. Any tip and trick you can use to remind yourself of those things and to change your mindset and focus on the positive aspects of the job is a good thing, and give a lot more credence to preventative medicine, because we do a lot of preventative medicine as paramedics, I think. Maybe that's not the right term, but we do it inadvertently without realizing we're doing it. We show up to people's house and we give good, sound, logical advice on their healthcare and needs that hopefully, even if, so it's a frivolous 911 call, there was no life-threatening emergency, right? It was some innocuous and silly, but we showed up, we gave good, sound, quality advice, we did a solid assessment, and we gave them a path forward, and now that patient is not going to end up in the ICU because of their problem, or, a prolonged hospital stay because of that problem. So anytime you can kind of center yourself, come back to earth, and remind yourself as the years go on that you're here to help people, not do some crazy rescue 911 lunacy every other day at your career. Those days come, but it's not every day.
So I'm hearing a lot. I mean, that was excellent, man. I'm hearing one thing that I've told guys a lot over the years, which is focus on your small wins and your infrequent wins. We don't have a profession that is a 90% success rate, not a 50% success rate. You may help 1 in 100 people, but hanging on to those 1 in 100, because that's what we're out there for.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can help. Yeah, man. Absolutely. All right.
Yeah. I think the irony in the end I think most paramedics would tell you the irony in the end is, though the trauma associated with the horrible things, the darkest, worst things that we see and deal with is, I don't mean to minimize that by any means, but I think for me and the majority of my friends, what burns us out more than anything in the world is the abuse of the system and the entitled attitude that you got to deal with on top of it, But again, center yourself. You're a mobile healthcare provider. The whole world is not, there's different people from different walks of life with different levels of education everywhere. And, you're there to educate people a lot of the time. So be proud of that.
Beautiful. So, Chris, before we close it up, is there anything you would like to say, to share, maybe for the first responders, veterans out there? Maybe something that you didn't know that you know now.
Oh man, there's so much. There's so much. It's like catch me at the right time because I could ramble on and on and on about it. Let me ruminate on it for a second. I wish so. I think that I don't know what if it exists ever in the other facets of public service, but in EMS, there's almost like a subculture that exists where like being popular or liked within those circles a lot of times depends on how good you are at being like edgy and boisterous and dark humor. And I think some people hijack that and it becomes like, again, their personality. And I think if I learned anything in the years of my career, it's that I started out kind of being like big heart, corny, cringy from time to time, like social media, whatever, excited about my job. And now like I already plateaued, went through the lows of it. You know, I'm sure there'll be more that I'll root out of and stuff. But if there's one thing I could say, it's don't ever be embarrassed or ashamed of speaking love about what you do and shouting out other people who you think are phenomenal at it too, you know. And I think it's tough with public service because we're blue collar, right? So it's like, oh, leave me alone, I don't give a shit, you don't want any of those accolades and stuff like that. But I think for our sanity's sake, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being proud of yourself from time to time for what you do and how you contribute to society. And the number one overreaching thing, I mean, you know, and maybe it's from the divorce end of things that this speaks volumes, but there is nothing noble about destroying your personal life so you can be better in your professional life.
I like that. Good stuff, Chris.
There's nothing noble.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening. Remember, focus on those small wins. Take care of yourself. Remember, we're human. Take care of each other. Again, Chris, thank you so much.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep. Have a good one, guys.